The thick stone walls of the Führerbunker seemed to press inward as General Heinz Guderian stood before the map table, staring at the colored pins and pencil marks that represented what remained of the Wehrmacht in February 1945. Above ground, Berlin shuddered under another wave of Soviet artillery fire, the concussions sending small cascades of concrete dust drifting down from the reinforced ceiling. Around him, other officers of the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht moved with the careful precision of men who had long ago accepted that they were presiding over a catastrophe, but had not yet determined how to acknowledge it aloud. Guderian had spent his career studying mobility, pioneering the theories of armored warfare that had revolutionized military doctrine and carried the Wehrmacht to stunning victories across Europe. Now, in the bunker's stale air, surrounded by maps showing Soviet armies closing like a vice from east and west, he confronted a different kind of immobility. The institutional paralysis of men who understood they were doomed, but remained trapped within a system that made acknowledging doom impossible, even suicidal. The trap had not snapped shut suddenly. It had closed gradually, a mechanism of ideology, oath, terror, and self-deception that had been tightening for years. Looking back, Guderian could trace its origins to decisions made long before the war's outcome became clear, to the structure of authority that Hitler had imposed on the German military, to the oaths of personal loyalty that bound officers not to Germany but to the Führer himself, to the ever-present threat of the SS and Gestapo that made dissent indistinguishable from suicide. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel entered the conference room, his uniform immaculate despite the deteriorating situation, his bearing still rigid with the same unquestioning obedience that had earned him the nickname Keitel the Lackey among his more independent-minded colleagues. Keitel represented the purest form of the trap, a career officer of considerable organizational ability who had surrendered his professional judgment entirely to Hitler's will, who had transformed himself into an instrument rather than an advisor, relaying the Führer's most insane orders without protest or modification. Behind Keitel came General Alfred Jodl, marginally more independent but equally complicit, equally trapped. Jodl still possessed the capacity for strategic thought and still occasionally raised objections to impossible directives, but his objections were always carefully phrased, always tentative, always abandoned. The moment Hitler's voice rose in anger, Jodl retreated. The meeting began with the usual fiction, the situation report. An intelligence officer read from his notes describing Soviet positions, estimated enemy strength, reports from the various fronts. The numbers were staggering. The Red Army had 300 divisions closing on Berlin. 300. The Wehrmacht's remaining combat-effective units could be counted in dozens, many of them divisions in name only, understrength collections of exhausted veterans, raw conscripts, and men pulled from administrative duties. In the west, American and British forces had crossed the Rhine. In the east, Soviet armies stood on the Oder River, less than 70 kilometers from Berlin. In the south, Army Group South was collapsing. In the north, East Prussia was cut off. Italy had surrendered. The Balkans were lost. The Reich had been compressed into a shrinking perimeter. Hitler arrived late, shuffling rather than striding, his left hand trembling, his face gray beneath the bunker's harsh lighting. The physical deterioration was shocking. More shocking was the cognitive disconnect. He spoke of counteroffensives, of armies that existed only on paper. He referenced destroyed divisions as if they were still combat-ready. He issued orders to units that no longer existed. His finger traced fantasy movements across the map. Guderian watched with horror and numb familiarity. Hitler fixated on minor details while ignoring collapse. He raged at retreats. He demanded offensives from exhausted units. He forbade defensive preparations. Every officer knew the orders were impossible. No one said so. Truth had become treason. General Walter Wenck attempted a gentle redirect. He noted that the units had no fuel, no ammunition. Perhaps, he suggested, consolidation and withdrawal might be more practical. Hitler exploded. No retreats, no withdrawals, no defensive thinking. Providence protected Germany. The Führer's will could not be denied. The tirade lasted 20 minutes. It might have worked in 1940. In 1945, it was madness. But the trap remained.
The officers had sworn loyalty to Hitler himself. The oath was sacred, enforced ruthlessly. The terror apparatus ensured compliance. The July 1944 plot had proven the consequences. Torture, show trials, executions, families destroyed. Dissent meant annihilation. Guderian faced the impossible choice: fight on pointlessly or die as a traitor. The system itself was corrupted. Independent officers had been removed, obedient ones promoted, parallel chains of command created. The Waffen-SS enforced loyalty. Political commissars reported on ideology. Military necessity meant nothing. Guderian tried once more. He presented force ratios, attrition rates, timelines. He suggested negotiation. Hitler relieved him of command, politely, coldly, final. A more pliable officer replaced him. The machine continued. Competence was removed, yes-men remained. Information fragmented, isolation deepened. Officers fought blindly, believing their sacrifice might still matter. Meanwhile, propaganda continued. Victory was coming. Wonder weapons. Coalition collapse. The truth was secret. This created another trap. Who would be blamed when the lies were revealed? Paulus had surrendered at Stalingrad. He was branded a traitor. The message was clear. Surrender was forbidden. Trust was impossible. Informers were everywhere. So they obeyed. They issued orders they knew were futile. They maintained fiction. Field Marshal Ferdinand Schörner embraced fanaticism. He enforced obedience with brutality. He drove men into hopeless attacks. Loyalty became meaning. Obedience became purpose. The bunker meetings continued. Phantom armies, imaginary offensives, rage at reality. Some officers chose suicide. Others waited. A few still believed. Most understood. They had created this system. They had sworn the oaths. They had followed the orders. Now they paid the price. General Hans Krebs sat making notes that would never matter. Orders for non-existent units. Plans for vanished fronts. It was absurd. It was horrific. Above them, Berlin burned. Civilians hid in cellars. Boys and old men manned barricades. Bridges were wired. Cities lay in ruins. And Hitler planned one more offensive, one more sacrifice. The trap was total. No honorable exit, no redemption, only death or disgrace. In the end, Soviet soldiers would enter the bunker. Hitler would kill himself. The officers would flee, surrender, or die. The system would collapse from exhaustion, but the trap would remain in history, a warning about obedience without conscience, about loyalty without judgment, about institutions serving ideology. They had built their cage and locked themselves inside. The bunker lights flickered. Guderian, dismissed but not yet gone, looked around at the officers still marking maps, still writing reports, still performing for an audience that no longer existed. He wondered if any would understand,
if any would warn the future. Then he gathered his papers, saluted, and walked toward the stairs into the ruins of Berlin, leaving behind the bunker and the generals who remained trapped within it, still serving, still obeying, still faithful to the end.